This is a CBS News special report. I'm Anthony Mason reporting from CBS News headquarters in New York. Good morning. Former National Security Advisor Michael Flynn pleaded guilty today to lying to the FBI about his contacts with Russia. He entered the plea in federal court in Washington. Then in a written statement, Flynn said he is cooperating with special counsel Robert Mueller. Mueller is investigating Russian interference in the U.S. election last year and whether anyone in the Trump campaign was involved. Flynn was a foreign policy advisor to the campaign and later President Trump's first national security advisor. Mr. Trump fired Flynn for lying to Vice President Pence about his contacts with Russia's ambassador to the U.S. In his statement, Flynn said it has been extraordinarily painful to endure these many months of false accusations of treason. But he said the actions I acknowledged in court today were wrong, and I am working to set things right. Flynn said, my guilty plea and agreement to cooperate with the special counsel's office reflect a decision I made in the best interest of my family and our country. I accept full responsibility for my actions. We are joined now by Paula Reed, who is outside the courthouse where Flynn entered his plea. Paula, what essentially does the special counsel get in exchange for this plea?
That's the question we've been asking all morning, Anthony. And newly released court documents give us some insight into what specifically Mike Flynn is going to give the special counsel, and it is significant. According to these newly released court documents, Mike Flynn will testify that before he met with Russian Ambassador Sergei Kislyak, he personally spoke with a senior official of the presidential transition team, who he will also testify was with other senior members of the presidential transition team down at Mar-a-Lago. He says they had a long conversation about what, if anything, he should discuss with the Russian ambassador. And specifically, the transition team told him that they did want him to talk about sanctions and also how not to escalate this situation between the United States and Russia following sanctions that had been put forth by the Obama administration. Now, this is very significant because this takes the onus off of Mike Flynn for having initiated this meeting with the Russian ambassador and shows that this was actually directed by the president's transition team. So this is a very valuable piece of evidence for Robert Mueller in his ongoing investigation into Russian influence in the 2016 campaign.
Just to be clear here, Paula, what this suggests is that Flynn was directed by the campaign, possibly the president, to reach out to Russia?
I want to stick very specifically to the language in the court documents because this is what he is testifying before a judge. This is what he's told the grand jury. He specifically says senior officials of the presidential transition team who was with other senior members of the president's transition team. There is no specific mention of the president in this part of these documents. So at this point, yes, they are saying that he was directed by the president's transition team to have this meeting with Sergei Kislyak and specifically to discuss sanctions and ways to not escalate the situation between the U.S. and Russia.
Paula, it's a very serious charge that Michael Flynn has pleaded to. He's agreed to plead to lying to the FBI while he was, in fact, in the White House as national security advisor in January. But he was being investigated for some more very significant charges, was he not?
Absolutely. Sources have confirmed that at least half a dozen witnesses have come here to federal court to testify about Michael Flynn's business dealings, specifically the lobbying that he did on behalf of Turkey and Russia. So that tells us that very likely Robert Mueller had more than enough information to indict Mike Flynn and potentially his son as well on what are called FARA, or failure to register as a foreign agent violations. Those are very significant charges. There were also some other legal questions about whether or not he could have violated federal law in talking about U.S. policy without formally being in the administration. But, Anthony, the special counsel has been willing to overlook all of that evidence that has been presented over the past 6 to 8 months and allowing him to plead guilty to making false statements. That told us that Michael Flynn had something really valuable to offer Robert Mueller, and here we're seeing part of what he was offering. And this is incredibly significant because, again, it shows that this meeting was at the behest of the transition team.
Paula Reed outside federal court. I want to bring in Jeff Pegues now, who's in our Washington bureau. Jeff is our Justice and Homeland Security correspondent. Jeff, what does this mean for the investigation now?
Well, that obviously it is proceeding and getting closer to the president's inner circle. Let me just set the scene here. I mean, one thing that comes out with this plea agreement is how hyper-focused investigators are on Flynn during the transition and then into the White House. Keep in mind, after he became National Security Advisor, 4 days after the inauguration, he was questioned by the FBI and then 18 days later fired, or about 18 days later fired, after it was revealed that he was compromised. And again, it was the acting attorney general at the time, Sally Yates, who went to the White House and warned them that they felt, investigators felt, that Mike Flynn was compromised because he hadn't accurately described his contacts with the Russian ambassador. And at the time, U.S. intelligence officials and law enforcement officials had access to these intercepts, these electronic intercepts that involve conversations between Sergei Kislyak and Michael Flynn, in which sanctions was discussed, even though, according to the vice president, Mike Flynn had told him that that was not the case. And so investigators at that time felt that he was compromised. So this is an important part of this investigation, that period between the transition and those first few weeks in the administration for Michael Flynn.
Jeff, what did law enforcement officials believe? I mean, what was their belief in looking at these intercepts and the information they had about the reason that Flynn was acting and reaching out to the Russians?
Well, listen, let's go back a year. December of 2016, the Obama administration was intent on sending a message to the Russians, a punishment, if you will, for interfering, for meddling in the 2016 election. How did they do that? They felt one step toward doing that was announcing these sanctions against certain people within the Russian government. And so when those sanctions were undermined, there were people in the intelligence community and the law enforcement community who were frankly shocked and surprised because the behavior of the Russians at that time was so, quote, un-Russian-like. Typically, when sanctions are announced, you would have some sort of reaction from the Russian government. But in this case, that didn't happen. And so as these intercepts came out, there were people in the law enforcement community who felt like they were being undermined, that the Obama administration was being undermined. Around the same time, you had certain Obama administration officials coming out and saying that there is one president at a time because they were seeing these interactions and they were concerned about them.
And their suspicion was that perhaps Mr. Flynn was being directed by somebody else?
Well, that was the suspicion, that he would not have done this on his own. I was told that multiple times during that period. They always felt that he was being advised or encouraged to make those contacts.
All right. I want to bring back Paula Reed again, who is outside the federal courthouse where Mr. Flynn entered his plea today. Paula, what happened in the conversation with Ambassador Kislyak?
All right, Anthony, I'm reading very closely, tiny print here, the documents that have been filed by special counsel. This is what Flynn will testify to. He will say that immediately after he talked to transition officials, he called the Russian ambassador and requested that Russia not escalate the situation between it and the U.S. and only respond to U.S. sanctions in a reciprocal manner. Now, he says also, immediately after that call, the transition team wanted to know how it went. They wanted an update. So he was constantly in communication with the transition team about his conversations with the Russian ambassador, how they went. And then just 2 days after this conversation that he had with the transition team saying, yes, go talk to the Russian ambassador. Let's talk about sanctions in a way to tamp the situation down. You see that Russian President Vladimir Putin on December 30th released a statement indicating Russia would not take retaliatory measures in response to U.S. sanctions. This is incredibly significant because this shows a very tight timeline and directly connects Vladimir Putin's actions to conversations that he was having with President Trump's transition team.
Paula, what do we know about when Michael Flynn made his decision to cooperate here? Do we have any sense of when he actually tipped?
Well, we know that there have been a steady parade of witnesses over about 6 to 8 months. But a few weeks ago, something interesting happened, which was that several witnesses that worked for a public relations firm who were expected to come here and testify, they were told to hold off Then earlier this week, we knew that Flynn's lawyers stopped cooperating with the White House, stopped sharing information with them about the investigation. Then we also know that Mike Flynn's lawyers met with special counsel earlier this week. So it appears that they were at least getting closer to a plea deal over the past several weeks. And we know that based on what sources have confirmed to us about what was going on with the grand jury and what we've confirmed about Flynn not cooperating with the White House. So, Anthony, it appears that they probably were likely always trying to get a plea deal, but it seems to have sort of closed the deal in the past several weeks.
And Paula, why do you think that he agreed to accept this plea deal?
Well, it's not only Mike Flynn who is under scrutiny here, it's also his son, Mike Flynn Jr. Both of them were potentially exposed to those foreign lobbying federal crimes that I talked about when you don't disclose the income or the work that you're doing on behalf of a foreign government. And while there's certainly an incentive for anyone to save themselves and offer what they have to avoid federal prison, there's even more of an incentive if your child is also potentially looking at a federal prison sentence. So based on the evidence that we know and the amount of charges that Robert Mueller could have potentially brought, all of these things come together is quite an attractive incentive to start talking.
Once again, as Paula Reed has been reporting, there is evidence Michael Flynn was directed by senior officials of the Trump transition team to make contact with the Russians. He has entered this morning a plea agreement accepting charges that he lied to the FBI in January while he was national security advisor in the Trump administration. We want to thank Paula Reed outside the federal courthouse there, and Jeff Pegues in our Washington bureau. There will be much more about this on your local news on this CBS station and on our 24-hour streaming news network, CBSN, and right here tonight on the CBS Evening News. For now, I'm Anthony Mason, CBS News, New York.
For news 24 hours a day, go to CBSNews.com.